my brother Marcelo, president of the Marist International Network of Higher Education. We are an organization that brings together more than 20 Marist institutions of higher education in 11 countries, all linked in some way to the legacy of Marcelin Champagnat, founder of the Marist Institute, whose mission began in France in 1817 and today is a global mission whose aim is to transform the world through education. One of the goals of our International Marist Higher Education Network is to provide its members with moments of training for their managers, professors, research, and students. Today, you will have the presence of Professor of the University of Newcastle, Dr. Müge Satar, who will be presented soon to talk to us about a topic of high relevance in our context of higher education, virtual exchange. First, however, we would like to invite Brother Luis Carlos, Vigário Geral, for a greeting on behalf of our Marist institution.
Muchas gracias, Marcelo, y saludos a todos ustedes desde Roma. Un cordial saludo a Joao, a la directiva de la red de universidades, a nuestra panelista, Müge Satar, y a todos el equipo de eventos institucionales, traductores y sobre todo a cada uno de los participantes. Ciertamente vivimos un momento histórico muy relevante y particular, muy excitante, porque tenemos la extraordinaria oportunidad de hacer un intercambio cada vez más sistemático, más profundo, más enriquecedor entre los distintos actores a través de la internacionalización y del proceso de compartir recursos humanos y posibilidades entre las universidades a distintos niveles. Y poder internacionalizar en casa es para nosotros una extraordinaria forma de colaborar, que nos abre nuevas posibilidades de trabajo conjunto. Además que nos ayuda en aspectos que estamos remarcando como la posibilidad del acompañamiento y desarrollo de la competencia intercultural, el desarrollo de las habilidades sociales, internacionales y globales, la articulación entre las universidades en sus planes de estudios, pudiendo soportar y llevar a cabo colaboraciones entre docentes, la cooperación en diversas áreas del desarrollo institucional, la investigación tan importante en nuestras universidades y el aprendizaje de diferentes lenguas para un desarrollo de un ciudadano cada vez más comprometido con el mundo y con las sociedades en el mundo. Yo creo que esto nos permite mejorar nuestra calidad como instituciones y abrirnos extraordinarias puertas para desarrollar la humanidad desde otra perspectiva. Así que me siento muy alegre de esta iniciativa. Les invito a todos a vivirla y a reflexionar juntos y gracias de nuevo a toda la directiva por abrir este espacio de la red de universidades maristas.
Thank you, Brother Luis Carlos, for the greeting. Our webinar will be conducted in English, but there will be simultaneous translation into Spanish and Portuguese. To activate the translation, just click on this icon below, a small globe that says interpretation, and select the language you want. Comments and questions are most welcome throughout the meeting. Feel free to write them in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and our team will gather the question, as well we'll read some later. We have the significant presence of Adriana Kempf, Dean of Graduation and Continuing Education, and Anna Wertheimer, Professor of the School of Humanities of this university. We also count on the presence of Professora Marília Morosini, who, together with her Teacher Adriana Kempf and her master's and doctoral students host Dr. Müge. Adriana will present our guest and the theme chosen for today, and Anna Wertheimer will lead the moment of dialogue with our guest. Dear Dr. Müge, thank you in advance for your availability to be with us, leading this important reflection. Dear Professor Adriana, thank you too.
Obrigada, irmão Marcelo, e saudando em seu nome, eu cumprimento a todos que estão aqui acompanhando o webinar. É uma grande alegria trazer um tema tão importante para a discussão junto à Rede Internacional Marista de Instituições de Ensino. E, mais uma vez, então, agradeço a todos que estão acompanhando este webinar multilíngua. Estamos aqui representados nas nossas diversas instituições e, neste momento de abertura, também neste aspecto intercultural. Um dos pontos importantes de desenvolvimento das instituições de ensino superior está relacionado à internacionalização. Do ponto de vista institucional, criar redes e parcerias fortalece e qualifica a partilha, a produção e a disseminação de conhecimento. Do ponto de vista das pessoas, amplia a visão de mundo, o reconhecimento da interculturalidade como um valor, os laços de solidariedade e de participar de uma humanidade comum. Quando se pensa em projetos de internacionalização, o primeiro pensamento que vem à mente refere-se à mobilidade física, ao fato de deslocar-se a outro país e presencialmente interagir. Mas inúmeros fatores não possibilitam que todos que desejassem viajar a outros locais tenham a possibilidade de fazê-lo. A internacionalização em casa, portanto, é um conceito importante, que compreende várias estratégias curriculares que tornam a internacionalização acessível a todos. Discutir temas globais, utilizar casos e referências oriundos de outros contextos em outras línguas, convidar professores, pesquisadores ou profissionais que atuam em diferentes países para conversar com os nossos estudantes, entre outras possibilidades. E hoje serão abordados aspectos relacionados às práticas de intercâmbio virtual para a internacionalização em casa. As práticas de intercâmbio virtual envolvem a realização de disciplinas online, por exemplo, em universidades diferentes da de sua origem, os projetos colaborativos online, entre outras formas de interação. E para abordar, então, de forma mais detalhada esse tema, do intercâmbio virtual para a internacionalização em casa, temos a honra de contar com a professora Müge Satar. Müge Satar é PhD em Linguística Aplicada e professora da Universidade de Newcastle, no Reino Unido. Ela pesquisa aspectos comunicativos e pedagógicos da interação multimodal para aprendizagem e ensino de línguas online, com foco na presença social, na criação de significado, instrução, design de tarefas e translinguagem. Desejamos a todos um excelente momento de reflexão. Welcome, Müge Satar.
Obrigada. Thank you very much for these nice introductions and a very warm welcome. It is a pleasure to be here today and with everybody else online. Thank you very much for attending and hope you will enjoy the talk.
Thank you.
So I don't know whether we're ready to share the slides. Obrigada. So today I'll be talking about virtual exchange and internationalization at home. And I work at Newcastle University. You can see my email on the slides, and my university profile is on the slides as well if you want to know more about my background. And at Newcastle University, I'm reader in Applied Linguistics, but I'm also our school director for internationalization. And I've been promoting virtual exchanges for a number of years now at Newcastle University. And we are looking forward to more collaboration with Pookie and the Menhen Network. Okay. In the EU, there is an organization called UniCollaboration. It is a cross-disciplinary organization for virtual exchange and telecollaboration. And I'm one of the General Council members. So that's my background in virtual exchange. The organization also has a journal, the Journal of Virtual Exchange, and I'm one of the co-editors. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the journal. And we publish research articles, practice reports, but also keynote articles. And I believe this is the venue where you can read about implementations of virtual exchange in multiple disciplines and keep up to date with virtual exchange. I was the chair of the International Virtual Exchange Conference in 2020, which we hosted in Newcastle University. And we have a book of proceedings. The theme of the conference was towards digital equity in internationalization. So I believe that might be relevant to some of you in the audience as well. So a little bit more about the journal. It is a fairly young journal, which started in 2018. We publish on a rolling basis. There are no publication charges, and it's a blind peer-reviewed journal. It is open access and it is available to everyone. We see it as narrow but wide field for virtual exchange because the journal and the organization in collaboration came out of researchers who are interested in technology-enhanced and computer-assisted language learning. But we now have opened it up to all disciplines and into all virtual exchange implementations in various subjects. So it is a venue for virtual exchange in a wide range of fields. So we think that provides a wide platform for people to share their work and to learn from each other. And here is some examples of publications from the Journal of Virtual Exchange, which to me gives a flavor of where the area is heading towards, like the way research is changing. And in parentheses, you have numbers, which are the number of citations those articles have received. Obviously, because we're a new journal, most of the newer research has got fewer citations, but we hope that's going to increase as well as our readership grows. So if you look at the left side of the screen, you see that at the beginning, we had Robert O'Dowd's keynote, which is a state-of-the-art kind of paper, which talks about what virtual exchange is and the different types of models in virtual exchange. So I highly recommend that to anyone who is a beginner in virtual exchange. But then we have articles on intercultural awareness, how virtual exchanges can work for pre-physical mobility before the students go abroad, articles talking about digital pedagogical competencies and teacher education, but also on cross-course design, geography courses, how virtual exchange is implemented in geography, how you can manage the data if you're researching virtual exchange, affective barriers, things like anxieties and what students feel. There are some papers on accessibility, inquiry-based and project-based learning. There is one paper that looks at food consumption and in a discipline of food, which is really nice and interesting, but also digital storytelling, again, intercultural competence, global citizenship, reflection on practice, year abroad, and more recently, a paper on how we can create safe but also brave online spaces for our students to share what they think and believe. And obviously, English is a medium instruction and foreign language learning is a recurring theme throughout. So I hope this gives you an idea of what you can find in journal. And on a quick outline for today's talk, I'm going to start with a definition of virtual exchange and what we know about the role of virtual exchange for internationalization in higher education. Then I'm going to give you an example of a curriculum embedded virtual exchange for teaching English to speakers of other languages in my own teaching. From that example, I will highlight how students represent themselves to their other cultural partners multimodally. And in my research, I use social semiotic analysis, but maybe we won't talk too much about the detailed analysis, but we will use the examples to give you a flavor of what it looks like. And I'd like to end with talking about some opportunities and challenges in virtual exchange, especially around equality, diversity, and inclusion. Okay, if that sounds all right, here is the definition of virtual exchange. It comes from Robert Adow's paper in 2020. So virtual exchange is an educational practice that involves the engagement of groups of learners in extended periods of online intercultural interaction and collaboration with international peers as an integrated part of their educational programs under the guidance of educators and facilitators. And you see, I've highlighted some keywords that are really, really important for a virtual exchange, which distinguishes it from any online communication. You can have your students interact with other students online, but unless you have engagement between the learners in extended periods, foregrounding the intercultural perspectives and global perspectives, integrating it in your education and have guidance from the educators, it's not necessarily virtual exchange. It's probably online communication and computer-mediated communication. And for me, out of the long sentence of a long definition, if I wanted to put it more simply, I would say it is guided online intercultural learner-to-learner contact, where the emphasis is on students working together rather than teachers teaching the students. Virtual exchange is not new practice. My pointer doesn't seem to be there. Thank you. Obrigada. It is not new practice. If you use the word virtual exchange to search and to find out what has been around, virtual exchange as a term was introduced around 2019 and 2020. So new research and new studies and practice reports are published using this term. But please also look for words such as telecollaboration, online intercultural exchange, collaborative online international learning, which some of you might be more familiar with, which is a SUNY State University of New York special organization. But you also have the LATAM COIL network specifically for Latin America. International online learning and globally networked learning. These are all kind of the terms that have been used for virtual exchange in the area in different disciplines for the last 20 years or so. So it's not very new pedagogy, but after the pandemic, more people got used to communicating online, and now it is a bit more of a highlight. There is more light on the topic. But I think it's also important to acknowledge what virtual exchange is not. So it's not distance education. It's not online teaching. It's not blended teaching. These three words emphasize the teacher and the students. So the students are there learning together with a teacher, but you can have virtual exchange as part of your distance education courses, for example. You can have your own students studying online and another institution with their students learning in their institution, and you can create a virtual exchange where the students at both institutions come together, do projects together, and learn together, really. And I think it's important to distinguish between virtual mobility and virtual exchange. So virtual mobility is very much like physical mobility. If your students go to another country, take their courses, become their students for a while, that's mobility. And virtual mobility is when your students in your own institution don't travel, but still become the students of another institution. They become their core community, they become part of their community, and that's virtual mobility. I hope this has clarified a few distinctions between key terms that we've been using in the last 2 years a lot. At this, I think also important to emphasize that virtual exchange is not in competition with physical mobility programs. We do acknowledge that physical mobility is a different experience and it is still needed, but virtual mobility provides opportunities to those who cannot travel. It is not an emergency tool, which we've been using a lot, but we can still see that it's going to stay with us, especially for internationalization at home strategies. And it's an effective educational tool that its effectiveness has been proven in various types of research. So why do we need virtual exchange, especially in these world times in the world? We need it, of course, for those students who cannot travel abroad, but we also need it because it opens up opportunities and opens up new understandings to all students. And I have this quote from Robert Hadout, which I think is really important. He says, "It is clear that in a world increasingly characterized by the rise of right-wing extremism, religious fanaticism, and populist political movements, virtual exchange will have an important role to play as educators strive to develop active, informed, and responsible citizens who are tolerant of differences and who are actively engaged in political and democratic processes." It is, in a way, key to our life, our social life, and how we organize ourselves. And we might think when we put our students in touch with other students, or if they go abroad and have physical mobility experiences, we may think that contact is enough. Just because they're in a different country or because they're speaking to other students from different backgrounds, that they will have new perspectives. However, it is important to note that we need facilitated interaction. It's been proven that contact in itself is no guarantee to improving attitudes to other groups, and understanding and tolerance only comes about by getting members of the different cultures actually working together in a facilitated fashion. I've forgotten this was a webinar, so I was going to ask everyone to type whether they have organized a virtual exchange for their students or at their institutions. If those participants online can interact with each other, please feel free to use the chat if you can see each other's messages to share your experiences. So let's come to the point that we're all interested in, which is internationalization at home. Internationalization is defined as the process of integrating international, intercultural, and global dimensions into the purpose, function, and delivery of post-secondary education. This is specifically internationalization at home in higher education. But we are also more recently seeing internationalization at home policies at basic education as well. And it plays a central role in the agenda of all universities, but also with the BRIC countries that are emerging as powerful regional stakeholders. It's part of our internationalization at home strategies or internationalization strategies at universities. Obviously, the number of students and staff who are recruited onto our campuses, who make our physical spaces more international, are important, but also the number of students and staff that are engaged in outward mobility are also indicators of quality and prestige in higher education. And virtual exchange can definitely add to this by offering a more inclusive approach to those non-mobile majority of students who cannot travel, and so that they can experience the underlying social, economic, academic, and intercultural learning benefits of an internationalized university experience. And what is the value and role of virtual exchange in internationalization at home? Virtual exchange can be part of the physical classroom, where your students physically on campus can interact with other students in another institution. But as I said, it can also be integrated into distance education, online teaching, or blended learning. The fact that students are not on campus doesn't mean they cannot take part in virtual exchanges. Virtual exchange is more environmentally sustainable, accessible, equitable, and it offers meaningful intercultural and multinational experiences, especially when it is facilitated and guided correctly. I suppose there is a tension between how we guide students, how we teach them to engage in open dialogue and understand each other, because there is also evidence that if we don't actually guide the students, it might reinforce existing stereotypes and existing understandings and prejudices. It offers learners interaction with being students from different language, linguistic, and cultural backgrounds. Because you're using technologies when you're interacting with people, it's been observed that students also improve their digital competencies. And I really liked this last impact. I think the real value of virtual exchange is here, because virtual exchanges have a positive impact on perceived self-esteem, curiosity, intercultural sensitivity, and it helps students to see complexity in intercultural communication. Students then realize, it's not actually differences between the weather, the festivals, and the food we eat. We also have complexities, more nuanced complexities in our interactions with people from other communities and cultures. So these are more of the soft skills that people call, but to me, those soft skills are essential skills in employment and future of our countries. So before time goes away, that we so that we have enough time, here's a quick example of virtual exchange from Newcastle University, as I said, from my own experience. And I teach future teachers, so it's part of a teacher training program. And why do we need virtual exchange in teacher education? There is increased interest in implementing virtual exchange in initial teacher education programs, but also it helps future teachers to discover, experience, and reflect on their own technopedagogy. It allows them to interact in authentic, linguistic, and intercultural settings, and it helps them to be ready for the 21st century language classrooms, so that they are ready to teach the new generation of students. And here is an outline of what the exchange looked like. So the first time we started was in 2018. This was pre-COVID, and we are still continuing. Actually, this year, we just started the exchange last week, and this is their second week, and I'm at the same time online trying to organize who speaks to what and what tasks they follow, sending them emails while I'm here. So it's two institutions. They both study the same discipline. They are both teacher educators, but teacher trainees, but virtual exchange partnerships don't have to be within the same discipline. So currently we have really good examples. For example, engineers working with social scientists to design a community physical space, or redesign a park, go and work together with their local community. So it doesn't have to be the same discipline. You can engage your students in interdisciplinary interactions. But for this one, they have the same discipline, kind of similar background. They all talk about pedagogy, technology, and my students also do a bit of research. In Newcastle, the cohort is usually international. In Turkey, those are usually students who've never been abroad, so they don't have any international experiences. So it is interesting to see the differences between these two cohorts. One be having impact of virtual exchange at home, and the other group are in physical mobility, and they are also taking part in virtual exchange. So there are some interesting experiences. Well, UK and Turkey are not too far. We're still on the same hemisphere, and we have about 2 hours of a time difference, but our academic calendars are not always aligned. So we usually have about 4 to 6 weeks of academic overlap, and that determines how long we can have the exchange. For our virtual exchange, we first start identifying the objectives. What do we want to achieve in our own courses, in our own institutions, in 2 separate countries? And what do we want to achieve with this virtual exchange? So it is really important to start with the aims, with what we want to achieve. And then we design the tasks around those objectives, how we can achieve them. And then we choose the technologies. Most people start the other way around. They first think of the technology because it's online communication, but it should be the last thing really that we need to consider. And we always start with an introductions activity where we create a Padlet board where they can add their images, a bit of text, introduce each other, a kind of an easy environment to start talking and interacting. Then we get them to speak on Zoom. This year, for example, we have 4 tasks. Tasks 2, 3, and 4 have now changed a little, but in 2018, this is what they talked about. They then talked about illiteracies and their own use of technologies. And Zoom was new to them because no one was using Zoom in 2018. So that was nice to see. So before I show you some more of the data and actual interactions, this is what they said at the end and in their portfolios. They said that they realized that it is essential to be polite and understanding, and how one person's normal is not necessarily another person's normal. What we understand from normal is different. And they said it is important not to generalize and not to stereotype. So they realized that cultures don't actually, there is no one culture and one nation. Within one country, within one nation, you also have multiple cultures. You also have people who behave differently. So they said it was great to connect with people from different cultures, backgrounds, and nationalities. It was great to get people together when they cannot be physically in the same place. And they said the project encouraged respectful engagement, which is one of the keys to intercultural and international communication. So we had, for this study, we will be looking at some of the Padlet board posts and how some of the learners actually introduced themselves multimodally and the variety of skills and experiences they had. Some students had fantastic experiences, but there were also some students who did not gain as much. And we will think about how we can provide them equal opportunities. And some of this work has been published and some is still in publication. So if you want to read more about the details of the analysis, you can find them in those journals. So the literature background in the background in research when we look at multimodal resources and self-representation comes from mainly these 3 references. So we look at identity from a performance approach. We think we see it as a form of socially meaningful practice. And as Ludmila Klimanova have said, increased multimodality in digital spaces can destabilize situated identities, and language learners can position themselves differently in multimodal communication. So there could be some students who are competent and capable communicators online, but not everyone is equally capable. And it is a venue for students to successfully establish an online social presence, as Adriana mentioned. And language learners could engage in digital communication by fully employing all aspects of their communicative repertoire, including multiple media, multiple languages, displaying multiple identities that may change throughout virtual exchange. So the methodology I'm using more recently in the latest years is social semiotics, which is a study of meaning within sociocultural context. And it's a method of analyzing multimodal communication. In social semiotics, all signs that we make are motivated. We choose to write signs for the meanings we want to represent. And learning is perceived as transformative engagement with signs. So when you translate a text into another language, that's an example of transformation, and meanings change. There is no perfect translation. Every time you change a language, or every time you change a text from poetry to prose, you lose some meanings, you gain some meanings. So that's what social semiotics looks at. And transduction looks at the same processes when you use, for example, language to describe something, and then you draw a picture of the same meaning. Again, you lose certain meanings, you gain certain meanings. So without further ado, here is what the introductions of some of our students looked like. So we called this one a typical post in our work. students tend to write a bit of text talking about who they are, their pets, their animals, what they do every day, their likes and dislikes, and they put a pretty picture of their self. So they usually kind of recline around, they have a cat, they have their cat on the bed, they have a book, they have a coffee cup, and they kind of show this relaxed, confident picture of themselves. And it looks very similar to posts you see on social media profiles, where you choose how you want to represent yourself. And their ability to appropriately choose and design this picture to us shows their semiotic agility, their ability to use all these different multimodal resources. In this cohort 2018, 2 students posted different images. So their images were with a senior white male member, and these people were professors in their field. So one of them is Professor Paul Seedhouse on the left-hand side, who works at Newcastle University in Applied Linguistics. And the other one on the right-hand side is Professor Stephen Christian in Linguistics again. So these students did not post their own images on their own, like the one on the left. They posted images with an important person. So they're telling us a different story. They're not telling us to look at themselves. Oh, look how pretty, how confident, how lovely I am. They're telling us, look at who I am with. So they're positioning themselves in relation to their relationships with other important people in their fields. And the student on the right-hand side also says, well, this picture was taken 3 years ago. I don't look like this anymore, but I'm still going to show you this because I'm with this person. So we call these power posts, and they do tell us different things about who they are and how they position themselves and how they want to be known in this virtual exchange. One of the students in Newcastle was Italian, and she already had an experience going in Turkey as a physical mobility. Well, this was a tourist visit, I believe. She didn't study in Turkey, but she posted a picture specifically from a street, a very common touristy street in Istanbul, Turkey. And you see in the background, the flags, the Turkish flags. She's holding a pretzel, which is a common food for breakfast. Everyone in Turkey loves them. And she describes her experiences in the text. She doesn't talk about, I have a cat, I like reading books. She says, oh, I've been to Turkey. I've experienced your culture. These are the things I've done before. And she received 13 likes and 7 comments. And that was the highest number of comments and likes from that cohort for their public posts. And when she reflected on her e-portfolio for her reflections, she did say, I thought it was a great advantage for me to have positive Turkish experiences to share. So she was aware of what she was doing. That was very much intentional. She said she wanted to show a picture of herself in Istanbul and mentioning the Turkish word for the typical bagels, which is simit, which is in the text. So she's already using their language rather than just using English as a medium of communication. She said, it wasn't just, I wasn't saying that Turkey is beautiful just to sound nice, but I have really been there and I have experience, and this is a real experience. So she was very skillful in representing real experiences of herself and how she wanted others to perceive her. And she also posted this little video in Newcastle, in Granger Market, which is an old traditional market like the one you have in town here in Porto Alegre. And what we see is she's recording a very short video as she walks through that market.
Market now. It's one of my favorite places in Newcastle. It's a quite big market. It's in the city center, and I like it because they sell fresh fruits and vegetables, and they're quite cheap. I know it doesn't look so exciting from this video, probably, but I really like it because I think it's an authentic place. And oh, a Turkish street food restaurant. I've never been there. Oh, now I'm going to have some good pizza. Here they make very good pizza. Bye.
Yep. So again, We see here intercultural affinity. She's able to skillfully portray in Newcastle, I'm Italian, so I'm going to get some Italian pizza. But on the way, oh, this is the first time I'm noticing there's a Turkish corner shop as well. I'm now interacting with you. I'm creating this video for you. And now I notice different things in my own environment. So she's able to communicate all of that in a very short, brief video. And in her reflection, we also do see that she has chosen video as a channel of communication to show something authentic about the place I live. It makes people feel more involved and allows them to grasp a more realistic and direct knowledge of the experiences. So she was very intentional on her multimodal choices. Okay, did all students have this fantastic experience? Unfortunately not. So here is another student from the UK who posted a picture on a beautiful beach, and the text, written text, is kind of very similar, talks about likes and dislikes and where they live. And the student says, I posted one of my favorite picture under my introduction and I thought people would like it. Apparently, it's not that charming enough to attract others because they didn't get comments. So likes are not enough anymore, especially with the social media experiences, which Steve Thorne calls cultures of use. We get to use online platforms and online communication in certain ways, and then we transfer those experiences to our other interactions. And because this student didn't receive any comments, they didn't have such a great experience as the other student had. Or here's another student post. This student was from Saudi Arabia. That's a female student. And as you see in the picture, they weren't able to show their face, and they covered them with little small heart figures because they cannot share their faces on social media if you're from Saudi Arabia. And they thought sharing photos and videos is the most effective way to convey meaning. So they're aware of certain affordances of multimodality, but they cannot share their face because of privacy reasons. She goes, I admire people who share their personal photos and let me trust them more. Their photos build a good image of their personality and their ability to make new relationships. She was able to share a picture, so we hope she was able to make good relationships, but without her face and probably not creating as many trusting relationships, or that's how she felt, at least. We don't have evidence of the relationships she created. So what this data shows us is that language is not simply a tool for communication. It creates symbolic power struggles that underlie any act, any speech act, any discourse, any verbal interaction, be it in face-to-face conversations or online tweets or political debates. And in digital online environments, people who can represent meanings and their identities more effectively by capitalizing on the affordances of the available media, by making the best use of these resources, they will have more symbolic power. And in turn, those students who don't have these capacities and skills, or who cannot use the same modes due to political reasons, maybe, or other disadvantages, maybe they don't have access to digital tools, they are at risk of being marginalized and not creating the same level or quality of relationships and experiences. In relation to virtual exchange and internationalization at home, we see that virtual exchange can offer real life experiences where they can present real experiences of their physical space through videos or through images, and they can reflect on ways of establishing and maintaining their online presence and voice, but also they can scaffold others in having a presence and voice. In some of the data I shared with colleagues here yesterday, we see how a group of students come together on Zoom and they invite each other. They kind of, if a student is quiet for a while, they invite them to speak up on purpose because they want to involve them in the interaction. Virtual exchange also can support the development of intercultural, international, and symbolic awareness, the awareness of how they make meaning to skillfully navigate unknown online international terrains and relationships. And in higher education, it is absolutely essential that we offer our students opportunities to practice and improve their digital intercultural communication skills. So virtual exchange is an approach that offers equitable and accessible experiences. That's what we always say when it's online, when it's digital, everyone can access, everyone can have equal experiences if they cannot participate in physical mobility. And what this study tells us, this kind of work shows us that it is also essential to remind ourselves that online communication spaces themselves are not inherently equitable. So by just offering something online doesn't mean we're providing everyone equal experiences. And learners' varied levels of background in their digital literacies, multimodal communicative competence, and semiotic skills tend to influence, if not determine, their virtual exchange experience. So it is important to remember that we need to help students develop these skills during their exchanges. And digital intercultural communication is mediated twice in a way. All our interactions are mediated largely with our language and our body language and the way we sit and behave and look. But in virtual exchanges, all of this is also mediated with technology. And obviously, it gives us freedom from the challenges experienced due to unequal linguistic competencies, because with the multimodality, you don't have to express yourself with language only. You can use a picture, a video, share a small link, and you have the freedom to express yourself better in different media, even if your language skills are not great. But there is also a bit of complexity because those who lack the necessary digital skills may not be enjoying the experience as much as the others. And on a final note, as I end this talk, I've just put a couple of questions for us to think and reflect on, and I don't have answers to those. I don't know how to answer them in the best way, but I hope we can have a bit of a discussion afterwards and consider these. So as we design and facilitate online intercultural and international exchanges as part of our global and internationalization agendas, how can we enable equal opportunities for multimodal self-expression? How can we consider our students' differing skills and competencies for digital communication? How can we pay attention to intercultural sensitivities that may arise due to different socio-political contexts from where the students are? How can we create safe spaces for intercultural dialogue and understanding, where students feel that they can share their opinions freely, but also bravely? You would remember the new article I pointed out at the beginning of the talk in Virtual Exchange, which talks about safe and brave spaces. And how can we ensure equality, diversity, and inclusion in our virtual exchanges? For example, at Newcastle in my school, I've been running this virtual exchange for 5-6 years now, and all the students who take my module, who take my course, can experience it, but other students who don't have the same experiences. So what can we do to make sure that those modules are open to all the students and we create experiences for all the students? And obrigada. Hello. Very happy. Yes, very happy. Of course, yeah. Please take your time. Bom dia.
Okay. Well. So may I just help? Yes. So Professor Marili is saying that that it's a theme that is not very well known all around, and I just want to thank you because you said that there is no perfect translation. So you know, I'm in a good position. But Marili, yes, sorry.
Pensando como captar, envolver professores para que façam a aula de home, virtual experience. Porque nós sabemos que o professor tem um papel extremamente importante em qualquer instituição para que novos modalidades de ensino e de aprendizagem.
Okay, thank you. So what Professor said is that she'd like you to help us with your experience in Turkey on how to motivate and involve professors, because professors are the most important people to develop and to improve new technologies.
Yeah. I agree, definitely. It's the people who teach have to connect together and set up the partnership, and it takes a lot of time and effort in setting up an exchange and running it, and to do it year on year, it is difficult as well. For me, some of the motivation comes from how the institution perceives virtual exchange. If it's part of the institution's strategic aims and perceptions, if the institution is committed to establishing these links, then all the professors have a bit more of a motivation. Some institutions also now are considering virtual exchange implementation as part of their promotion criteria. So if you do virtual exchange, maybe you move up your career a bit better. They also create seminars and kind of talks and conferences within their institution, so the people who have these experiences can share it with others, again, which gives more recognition of the work professors do in their own time. And I think it's really important to have institutional level partnerships. So with the university in Turkey, I shouldn't really say which university, the university in Turkey that I'm working with, we don't have a institutional partnership with them. But I work with that institution because I know the professor there, and I can rely on her, and I know that our programs link, and that's how we started, and we have been continuing. But I don't have any further links with that institution, and if she happened to change her job, go somewhere else, I would need to find a new partner. And that means more work for me, because our objectives are going to change, our tasks are going to change, because the partner requirements are going to change. So I think another important part is to have institutional level agreements and partnerships. Even if the person moves, it is part of the curriculum. So you're not relying on person-to-person relationships, but it is what the curriculum requires and what the syllabus requires. So whoever teaches that module, then you still keep continuing the exchange. And that person who teaches that course can have new experiences. It could be if they hadn't run any virtual exchanges before, because now they have to teach that course. It could be part of their continuing professional development. Maybe there could be somebody in the institution who are running training events, or they could be paired with another professor who has virtual exchange experiences, and they can learn from each other. So the module can then create further learning opportunities for the professors who work in the institution.
Vou fazer então resumo para, yes, I'll just try to summarize, yes, for those who can't understand English. Então, a professora falou de promover seminários, né, para que os professores possam trocar as suas experiências internacionais com outros professores. Falou também em, talvez, em promoções, né, ligadas com essa experiência dos professores e, principalmente, promover parcerias, né, com instituições, né, para que não fique perdida, para que não seja só entre dois professores, mas que seja uma parceria institucional. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe I should do it in bits as well, shouldn't I? Stop in between.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay.
That's all right. So there is a professional helping me. Right. There's a question here. Yes. Yes. So, well, I'm going to summarize, and if there is a mistake, then you help me, okay? But as far as I could understand, the question is, how can we join two institutions which are very different, yes? So the example here is one institution from Australia with 30,000 students together, having a partnership with, a partnership with an institution from Kenya, yes? How can the bigger institution understand that they have something to learn from, yes, from the partner?
Well, I'll be very happy to hear more about the Kenyan institution experiences, because there are very few virtual exchanges ongoing in Africa, especially. There is some in South Africa, especially with the DUT. What are they? Institute of Technology. I've forgotten the full name of the institution, but there are some exchanges in South Africa, but I have not heard of any in Kenya. So I'll be very interested to see how a virtual exchange or a partnership can happen. I think there is a bit of responsibility that lies on the larger institution, because if they come to the partnership expecting the smaller institution to fit in with their requirements and understandings, that partnership is not going to be equal, and that may not work successfully. I think it's really important for any institution coming from anywhere in the world to come to the partnership, especially for virtual exchange, thinking all partners are equal, ensuring that all partners' requirements and needs are addressed in the common design of the exchange. Obviously, if you have much fewer students in one institution and a larger group in another institution, there are questions around inclusion, who gets to interact with who, but I would assume the larger institution will have other partners as well. So maybe they offer a partnership to a group of their students who have an interest in Africa and exchange with them. So maybe that they can identify the departments and the sections where they have commonalities. So if they have the same disciplines or cross-disciplinary, if there are projects that can work together, maybe they can identify those smaller, more local cultures in the institution to then exchange and collaborate. But obviously, different resources, different access to internet connection becomes a problem. Because in some exchanges, the students have to be on campus because that's where they have access to technologies and Wi-Fi. In other institutions, they have access everywhere, wherever they go. And with the time differences, especially if you want students to meet synchronously, which they seem to enjoy more, then that creates further challenges. And then obviously the larger institution maybe who has access to more internet connections, more reliable connections, more technologies, may need to adapt to the requirements and needs of the smaller institutions sometimes. So it does vary, but I think it all starts with open dialogue and sitting down to first to listen and understand each other, understand the needs, and then see how you can create collaborations and partnerships. But that's my perspective, and I'm not an internationalization officer. I haven't really created many partnerships, and I'm pretty sure in your organization you will have a lot of expertise and thoughts and opinions about that as well.
Yes, thank you. There is a second question. Yes, go on. Yes, there's a question here about the difficulty we have in the network of the schools to have, you know, let's say a real partnership. Yes, because they have they are partners because there are people who come and they know each other. They come and have lectures, but at the same time they don't develop big or projects together. Yes, so the exchanges, as far as I could understand here, the exchange is limited to, you know, knowing each other and coming and going professors for lectures. Yes, but not a real big project. So the question is, how can you, if you could share your experience and give us some hints, yes, to consolidate the projects that really, projects that are going to have impact in the community, not only to our students, yes, but the whole community.
Yes, I do understand that sometimes exchanges are limited to physical mobility. So thank you for that question and comment. It is usually more difficult to then have sustained interactions, and that relies on sometimes on resources, sometimes on time. I do feel really privileged to be here for a week so that we interact more, which sometimes is very difficult to go somewhere for longer periods. I couldn't stay here for 2 weeks because I have to go back to teach, and then there will be no time to carry out certain things, but we have a keen interest. So we will identify what we want to work on and how we can continue to work. So in the physical exchanges, maybe they can allocate a bit of time to see what they can do next and how they can continue to work. And the projects where you can involve the community are really, really interesting, which is a piece of work they have put in a funding application. We don't know the outcome yet, working with Miriam Hawke from the Open University in the UK, and from UNESCO, Ana Biniado Salamao and Osvaldo Succe, who are in virtual exchange. We have an idea how to engage our students with the community. So we want local, and now we want the local experiences to be global. So we are going to identify a certain project where students in each institution are going to carry out in their local environment, and then they're going to come together globally, plan, exchange information, exchange ideas of what could be done then locally again. And Miriam Hall calls this critical virtual exchange. And then you get students both engaged with the local environment, but also they have global connections addressing similar issues in their local world. So hopefully we'll be able to carry that out, and I'll be able to share more next time.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you. So, Rafael was talking about you said something about you know, the professors, yes, and how difficult it is to motivate this. Can you just repeat the first part? Okay, right. Got it. Yes. So Rafael is asking about how to form teachers. Yes, how to prepare the teachers for this intercultural, you know, exchange, because the teachers have to be aware of the students, as of the cultural differences. Yes.
from my experience, attending to seminars and reading and learning about virtual exchange is important. Yes, that's part of it. And I will promote the Journal of Virtual Exchange again. There's a lot of information there, so that's a start. But also institutional training opportunities are important. For example, we use on our learning platform, we have a specific module on virtual exchange where all members of staff can join. So it's not a platform only for transfer of knowledge, but it's also a platform where we are able to share our practice and what we do. So creating a bit of a community of practice within the institution helps. You can find out things on your own, you can attend many seminars, but there's always somebody else who does things slightly differently. So having a space with a bit of information and a space for sharing of experiences to me is important. Another way to prepare teachers for virtual exchanges, to create virtual exchanges, is to give them real life experiences, so experiential learning. They could themselves participate in a virtual exchange. There are some platforms and external providers and organizations who organize virtual exchanges for any student, any staff in the world. And they could first try it out with a partner institution, maybe by themselves engaging with virtual exchange. This is what I'm trying to do in my teacher training course. I see that as experiential learning experience. And the final thing I hope would help, it has been helping us, at least at Newcastle, is to have a buddy system, almost a peer that you can always interact with. So we have now another lecturer in my section who has started an exchange with IUPUI in the US this year. And that's how we started. We sat down together first. It was through my connections that we found a partner for her. And then with the partner also had training in his own institution. And we sometimes come together, have a quick chat about how things are going, how the tasks are designed. Just somebody to pass on some ideas with also helps to guide. Sometimes it works much better than any formal training because you have someone to learn, and especially if you know that person in your own section and department, it helps. I mean, we enjoy sitting down and talking, so I guess that's the part of being a partner in virtual exchange, as in learning partner in virtual exchange.
Yes. Thank you very much. There's another question here. Yes, there's a question here about the challenge. It's an important challenge in the network, the international network, yes, Marista, yes, of higher education. Is so the challenge is to show the advantage, yes, of being part of a network, yes. So in this sense, the virtual exchange, yes, seems to be a possibility to make it evident, yes, to show that there is an advantage of yes. So the question is, do you think it's possible to build relations, yes, virtual exchange with students and professors from intercontinental groups, which might be very diverse, very different? So is it better to work in small groups or in bigger groups? So what is your opinion about that, maybe?
I think very briefly, yes, there is a lot of value to work with institutions from different backgrounds. The students then realize the wider diversity that exists in the world. But I also say you are sometimes really different from the person sitting next to you or from your neighbor. You don't realize the different perspectives unless you start talking about issues on sustainable development, gender equality, or kind of some more difficult concepts of religion and politics. And then you understand, oh, actually, we live on the same street, but we are very different. And it's about how you still continue to carry out those relationships regardless of the differences, being open to differences and understanding each other. I think as the person who commented said, it is a real advantage to be part of the Minster network, because then you don't have to look for a school or an institution to collaborate with. You just think of an area where you want to address a challenge, a local challenge maybe in an area where you think your students and their experiences and worldviews here in your own institution can support the other students. And that's a fantastic opportunity to work together. If you want your students to have real experiences and one-to-one connections, it usually works better in smaller groups, because then everybody has a chance to say something, everybody has a chance to speak. But if your course has, I don't know, 100 students, you could put them in smaller groups, and it could still be possible with 2 courses with 100 students. You will have a lot of groups to manage, probably, but you can still put them in 10 different groups or 20 different groups of 10, or 25 groups of 6, that works. On Zoom interactions especially, or on collaborative projects, I say groups of 4 to 6 work best. Sometimes if it's pair interactions, conversation stops. It depends so much on the 2 individual students, whether they get along or not. If one of them is no longer available, what do you do for the other student? And if it gets more than 6, I think then, if you think of 60 minutes of a conversation, each student gets 10 minutes. And if it's more students, then they get very little space to share. So my magic number is 4 to 6 for synchronous interactions. Yes. Please.
There's one.
Pensamos em ter uma organização que meio para a interculturalidade. Difference cultures, a internacionalização é forma, isso is not possível. É barata, é possível com a tecnologia. A minha pergunta é pouco em termos de estratégias. Existe uma rede que tu dirias para começar a busca, que estratégia seria a mais importante para que se estabelecesse possíveis virtual exchange. Maybe formação de professores, portfólio of knowledges.
So, thank you. Yes. Well, Professor Marília started saying that internalization, yes, we see internalization as a means to interculturality, yes.
Yes.
So internationalization at home is a cheap and possible way of exchanging, yes. And there is the network. So the question is, what strategies can you share with us to actually start the partnership? Yes, there is the network. So how can we start this exchange, the virtual exchange? Maybe considering, yes, the training teachers, forming teachers, or sharing knowledge, yes, a portfolio of knowledge. So what strategies?
I think a good way to start is to think of the needs in the network. What are the needs in different local areas that needs to be addressed, either the institutional needs or local needs, and then try to see who can work together. I would also think another way is to focus on the expertise. Who has the expertise in which institution, in which local area to address those? This could be via similar programs of undergraduate or postgraduate programs, similar disciplines or cross disciplines where the students can actually work together. Physical mobility is still important. It helps to start up the relationship, but I don't think it's a requirement. As I mentioned, the other virtual exchange in my school, where another lecturer now works with an American institution, they've never met each other in person. But on my side and on our side and on the IUPU side, the international office members, and I was involved as well on my side, met together, worked together, and we kind of guided them in how to start a partnership. So identify the needs, identify the technologies, think of whether you want synchronous or asynchronous interaction, what kind of tasks and projects you want your students to create. So I suppose somebody facilitating the virtual exchanges and how to start and how to guide also helps. But also, as I mentioned, having an institutional platform with a bit of information and a community to start to ask each other questions also does help. At least that's been my experience. I'm pretty sure there are others.
Yes, and there's a last question here.
Okay.
It's just out of curiosity, somebody said. Yes, the question is in English. So do you know any successful virtual exchange experience in Latin America?
I do actually. Ana Vinhada Salamaua in Unesp has a lot of experience, and Oswaldo Succi, and we have some practice reports both in the journal and but also in the proceedings of the International Virtual Exchange Conference. If you also look at researchpublishing.net, there is a number of books. There are a number of books which have published successful virtual exchange experiences. And have a look at the LATAM COIL network, their website. They also have a number of resources there and a number of projects that have been running in Latin America.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. Yes. Any other questions? No. Okay. All right. Brother Marcelo, are you with us? Yes. Okay, so it's your turn.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Dear all, unfortunately, we have room of the time. You are moving towards the end of this webinar, but this is just the beginning of this important reflection that we carry out as an international marist network of higher education. In our educational and mission space, seeking to build an authentic proposal for this complex world based on our solid educational traditions. Thanks again, Teacher Adriana and Anna, for your kindness and collaboration with us in carrying out this webinar. Thanks, Teacher Marilia Morosini for the contribution. And a special thank you for Dr. Müge for accepting our invitation and leading this important reflection. Once again, thanks to all the participants. See you all next time. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you. Been a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.